It's September 2024 and I'm standing on the site of a Roman amphitheatre in the settlement of Dorset, except it's built on the site of a former Neolithic henge, and it's not the only instance round here of the Romans recycling. Today, Dorchester is the county town of Dorset, an historic market town located on the Dorset River Frome in the lands between the Dorset Downs to the north and the South Dorset Ridgeway to the south. Though not all the hills and mounds around the town are of such natural formation, with the area around the town home to many prehistoric structures, including the spectacular Maiden Castle, which was probably a major settlement for the Duro-Tridges, the last of the Celtic tribes who lived in the area of modern-day Dorset, southern Wiltshire, southern Somerset and eastern Devon, right up until the Roman invasion in the AD 40s. It's likely that the human habitation of this land goes back even further, with indications of settlement over at least 6,000 years. At some point during the Neolithic period, around 6,000 to 4,500 years ago, the Maumbury Rings were created, a roughly circular henge, that's a set of earthworks formed of a ring-shaped bank and ditch, with a ditch inside the bank. The ring has an internal diameter of about 50 metres, with the banks 5.6 metres high internally and 4 metres high outside. With multiple reuses over millennia, the internal ditch has long since been lost. Excavations carried out in the years before World War I show there were a series of deep shafts cut into the chalk walls, up to 45 shafts with some up to 11 metres deep. Of these, 8 were fully excavated and contained, amongst other things, antler, animal and human bone, flints and carved chalk. The Romans undertook the first major remodelling of the site when they recycled it into an amphitheatre for the citizens of Dorset. Originally a small garrison fort, it became a civilian settlement around 70 AD, and what better way to provide the full Roman experience than getting your own amphitheatre without all that expensive stonework and marble. During that time, the banks were lowered, the interior was transformed into a level arena floor, and seating was cut into the banks. Finds found during excavation includes coins from the 2nd century. Finds the arena floor show activity as late as the 4th century. After the Romans departed, there's little evidence of the site being used for nearly 1,300 years, until the English Civil War, when the site was adapted by parliamentarian forces into an artillery fort, which involved replacing the gun platform and ramp on the southwest side and an internal terrace. In the late 17th and early 18th century, the role of entertainment venue was resurrected as a place of public execution, including 80 of the rebels in the Monmouth Rebellion in 1685. By the end of the 18th century, the site was being used as farmland. In 1846, the proposed alignment of the Southampton to Dorchester Railway was amended in order to protect the rings, though full protection only arrived for the rings in October 1962, when they were listed as a scheduled monument, protecting them from any unauthorised changes, and today, along with being a public open space, they occasionally revert to entertainment venue for open-air concerts, festivals and reenactments. Modern-day Dorchester isn't lacking for public open space, with the walks, a tree-lined route that traces much of the old line of the Roman town walls, wrapping around the town centre, dating back to landscaping carried out in the first half of the 18th century. On the western edge of the walks, the 10 acres of the Borough Gardens provide another green lung in the heart of the town centre. The Grade 2 listed gardens first opened in 1896, following the purchase of the land from the Duchy of Cornwall and another local landowner the previous year. The existing mature trees were incorporated into the design of the park, supplemented by new planting and modifications to the ground level across the site to create curvilinear walks. The park opened for public on the 30th of July 1896. In the subsequent years, there have been further additions to the park, including in 1898 a bandstand and 12 surrounding benches to coincide with Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee. In the same year, the fountain, donated in memory of the 5 times Mayor of Dorchester, J.G. Gregory, was opened. The following year, a stone obelisk was erected as a memorial to the men of the 1st Battalion of the Dorset Regiment who died in the Tirah campaign in India the previous year. In 1905, a cast-iron clock tower was donated by Charles Hansford. Following a refurbishment and restoration project, the park was rededicated on the 7th of May 2007. Just to the north of the Borough Gardens is the only remaining remnant of those Roman walls that once enclosed the town of Dorset. Originally constructed as an earthen bank and ditch sometime after 130 AD, the stone walls were built along the front of the bank at a much later time, possibly the 4th century. The defences continued to be used into the medieval period, with the ditch being recut in the 14th or 15th centuries, though within 200 years the walls had mostly disappeared and were soon replaced by the walks. After the departure of the Roman administration, the local Romano-British tribes ceased to occupy the area, a vacuum that would eventually be filled by invaders, with the area around Dorchester possibly the site of one of the first Viking raids on Britain around 790. By 864, the area was in control of the Saxons, and the town took on the name Dorwarencester, which thankfully evolved into the less than mouthful Dorchester. When the Normans arrived, they decided the area was not of great significance, as whilst they built a small castle, nothing of it has survived. It wasn't until the late medieval period that the town started to prosper, becoming a thriving commercial and political centre for South Dorset, with textile trading and manufacturing. The town suffered several serious fires in the 17th and 18th century, which led to much of the town centre being rebuilt in Georgian style. Founded in 1846, the Dorset Museum and Art Gallery, formerly the Dorset County Museum, is home to much of the history of the town and the county. It's based around two significant collections: the archive of local lad Thomas Hardy and the fossils of the Jurassic coast. The total collection is over 4 million items, and in 2016, plans were unveiled for a major extension which, following delays caused by the you-know-what, opened in May 2021, allowing the original Victorian Hall to be opened up devoid of museum display cases for the spectacular space that it is. Thomas Hardy was one of the original founders of the museum, and over 7,000 artefacts related to him are in the museum's collection, including rare first editions and some of his original handwritten manuscripts. The ground floor of the new building houses galleries dedicated to the geological treasures of Dorset, with the coast of the county home to some of the richest fossil deposits on the planet, with a unique 185 million year geological history having been exposed by coastal erosion, with an almost continuous sequence of rock formation covering the Triassic, Jurassic and Cretaceous periods. The display also looks at some of the key local people involved in geology and paleontology, with Mary Anning perhaps the most important both locally and globally for her discoveries in Lyme Regis that helped create the evidence to back up the theories of extinctions. On the first floor, the People's Dorset Gallery takes a quick canter through 500,000 years of human history in the county, from the earliest prehistoric finds through to the modern day via Bronze, Iron, Roman, Saxon, Norman and Middle Ages. A short distance from the museum, located behind the 1930s designed County Hall and discovered during the preliminary building works for it, is the Roman townhouse. Dorset County Council acquired Collington Park in 1933 as a site for construction of their new County Hall. As part of the building works, an archaeological investigation was carried out before building works could commence, and during those works in 1937-38, the townhouse was uncovered. Its location is very close to the North Walk and West Walk, meaning that it was located right by the old Roman walls of the town. It's estimated that the house was originally built around 307 AD and was extended in 341 AD. In its final form, the house comprised of two principal ranges of rooms. The West Range, comprising what are now called rooms 8 to 18, include a number of detailed mosaic floors. This part of the building is now covered by a steel and glass building constructed over the foundations between 1996 and 1999 to protect the floors. The South Range, comprising rooms 1 to 7, survives just as flint and stone walls out on the grass-covered site, though linked to the West Range as both have intricate hypocausts on display. Despite being county town since at least 1305, the town of Dorchester remained lacking in any major military presence until the construction of the depot barracks, which were built between 1877 and 1881 on the site of an earlier militia barracks that had only been established a little over a decade earlier. Though from the design of the keep, you'd have thought it might have been Norman in construction. When it opened in 1881, it became home to the Dorsetshire Regiment, often shortened to the Dorset Regiment, who were the only tenants of the site during its 77 years of service. In 1958, following its amalgamation with the Devonshire Regiment to form the Devonshire and Dorset Regiment, the Army relocated the headquarters to the former Devonshire HQ at Wyntham Barracks near Exeter, leaving the Dorchester site empty. The site of the barracks was quickly redeveloped, with some of the barrack blocks being demolished, but others being taken over by the County Council and the Royal Mail, the latter still in residence. The Ministry of Defence did retain ownership of the keep and converted it into the Regimental Museum for a number of different locally linked parts of the armed forces, including the Devonshire Regiment and the Dorset Regiment from both before and after their amalgamation, as well as the Dorset Yeomanry, Queen's Own Dorset Yeomanry, the Dorset Militia and the Royal Devon Yeomanry. Along with medals, uniforms, weapons and equipment, the museum is also home to Adolf Hitler's writing desk, which was liberated from the ruins of a chancellery in Berlin in 1945. On the first floor is a mock-up of a trench from the battlefields of World War I that the soldiers of regiments would have been very familiar with, complete with a realistic soundtrack. You can also head up onto the roof of the keep to take in the views over the town, from the historic spires of St Peter's, the Corn Exchange and All Saints in the town centre, to the clock towers of modern Maumbury, the rolling green hills of Dorset, and down into the former parade grounds, now Royal Mail sorting office car park. Heading out east from the town centre, you reach one of the town's most important houses, Maxgate, built by and for Thomas Hardy. Writer, novelist, poet, and importantly for Maxgate, architect, Thomas Hardy was born in Stinsford, a small village about a mile east of Dorchester, on the 2nd of June 1840 to stonemason and builder Thomas Hardy and Jemima Hand. The fact the couple had married on the 22nd of December 1839, less than 6 months before young Thomas's birth, may have helped shape the less than Victorian conformist view the writer had in his later days. The oldest of 4 children, with his sister Mary, 1841 to 1915, brother Henry, 1851 to 1928, and youngest sister Catherine, 1856 to 1940, the family were unable to afford a university education, so at age 16, Thomas was apprenticed to James Hicks, a local architect. In 1862, he moved to London and was enrolled as a student at King's College, later winning prizes from both the Royal Institute of British Architects and the Architectural Association. In the middle of that decade, Hardy was in charge of the excavation of part of the graveyard of St Pancras Old Church, shortly before its obliteration by the extension of the Midland Railway's St Pancras Terminal. In 1870, whilst working in Cornwall, Hardy met and fell in love with Emma Gifford, who he married 4 years later in Kensington. During this time, Thomas had started to publish his writings. Initially, Desperate Remedies, 1871, and Under the Greenwood Tree, 1872, were published anonymously. The first book published under his own name was A Pair of Blue Eyes in 1873, which drew heavily on Hardy's own courtship with Emma. 1874's Far From Madding Crowd introduced Wessex into his novels and was successful enough that Hardy was able to give up architectural work and pursue his literary career. It also enabled him and Emma to relocate from London to Dorchester and to the house that Thomas designed, Max Gate. To keep it in the family, the builders working on the house were Thomas Sr. and Henry Hardy. Thomas Jr. and Emma moved into Max Gate in 1885. It was from this house and the various studies he had in it that he wrote some of his most famous works: The Mayor of Casterbridge, Tess for d'Urbervilles, and Jude the Obscure. Over the years, the house was extended on two occasions. First, a small side extension, and later on, a major extension to the back, in part funded by the skyrocketing sales of Jude the Obscure, 1895, after the then Bishop of Wakefield railed against the book in the press, creating the natural surge in sales the bishop had hoped to avoid. After the publication of Jude the Obscure and the outcry, Thomas gave up writing novels. Not because of the criticism, but because he was now wealthy enough from the ongoing royalties to be able to focus on his true love, poetry, which generated almost no money. Thomas had never been religious, but Emma was, and Jude was perhaps a religious attack too far, as the couple became estranged, with Emma retreating to the attic of Mac's house until her death in 1912. 2 years later, Thomas married his secretary Florence Dugdale, who was 39 years his junior, though he remained preoccupied by his first wife's death, with remorse poured out in his poetry. Hardy died in Max Gate on the 11th of January 1928, having dictated his final poem to Florence on his deathbed. There was controversy after his death, as Thomas had wanted to be buried in the same grave as Emma in Stinsford, but the executor of his estate insisted he be placed in Poets' Corner in Westminster Abbey. A compromise was finally reached whereby his heart was buried in Stinsford and his ashes in Westminster. Florence continued to live in the house, but she had always been poorly, and she died just 9 years later in 1937. After she died, the house was stripped and put up for sale. At the auction, Catherine Hardy, the youngest and only surviving sibling, purchased the house, though she only lived in it until her death in 1940, at which point she bequeathed it to the National Trust with a stipulation that it should be lived in. Several tenants lived in the house up until 2011, when the National Trust was able to have the stipulation removed and were able to open the house to the public, possibly helped by the fact that none of the four siblings had children, so the Hardy line died out with Catherine's death in 1940. 2.5 miles southwest of Maxgate and less than 2 miles southwest of Dorchester is Maiden Castle. Originally a small chalk hill, the land has been shaped by nearly 4,000 years of human activity to create a unique natural and man-made structure on a scale not seen elsewhere in the country. The earliest archaeological evidence of human activity on the site shows that during the Neolithic era, a causeway enclosure and bank barrow had been built. Sometime around 1800 BC, during the Bronze Age, the site was being used for farming, with evidence of crop growing on the land, before being abandoned for around 1,000 years for no known reason. The first defensive structures on the top of the hill were built around 600 BC, with little to distinguish it from the many other hill forts built around the British Isles at this time. It's not known why, but sometime around 450 BC the site was massively expanded, almost tripling in size to cover the full 47 acres at the top of the hill, making it the largest hill fort on the British Isles and possibly the largest in Europe. Along with the expansion, the defences were made significantly more complex, with additional ramparts and ditches creating much of the structure that exists to today, with concentric rings of ramps and ditches all the way around the edge of the site. The final structure had 4 ramparts and 3 ditches at the southern end of the fort, though due to the steepness of the northern slope, the 4th rampart did not extend all the way around. Less than 400 years after the expansion, the fort had shrunk back to just occupy the eastern side of the site, but it remained occupied up until the arrival of the Romans in the middle of the 1st century, at which point it appears the fort was abandoned, although it's likely there would have been a Roman military presence on the site, if only for its usefulness in looking over the surrounding land. In the late 4th century, a temple and ancillary buildings were constructed close to the highest point of the hill, though by then the Roman Empire's time in the British Isles was drawing to a close, and by the 6th century the hilltop had been entirely abandoned, being used only for agriculture from then on. Despite hill forts becoming of interest to archaeologists in the second half of the 19th century, it wasn't until the 1930s that any investigations were carried out on Maiden Castle. Further excavations were carried out in the mid-1980s, triggered in part by the rapidly deteriorating condition of the fort caused by the number of visitors heading to the site. Works carried out by the now landowners English Heritage alongside the excavations helped repair and stabilise the site, which had been listed as a scheduled monument in 1981. With repair works completed and defined paths marked out, the site remains popular with visitors, if only for the views out over the countryside and Dorchester's modern extension, Maumbury. Dorchester South is located on the South West Main Line from London Waterloo to Weymouth, with half-hourly services Monday to Saturday, hourly on Sunday, taking just under 3 hours to make the journey to London, less than 90 minutes to Southampton Airport Parkway for Southampton International Airport, and 2.5 hours to Woking for rare-leg coaches to London Heathrow Airport. Dorchester West is located on the Heart of Wessex Line from Weymouth to Bristol via Yeovil, Westbury and Bath. About 8 trains a day on weekdays and 4 on Sundays run to Bristol, taking just over 2 hours. There are coach connections at Bristol Temple Meads to Bristol Airport.